inside jokes. I'd love to be a part of one someday. That's a line from a comedy that I saw a while ago. And what puts you on the inside of an inside joke, huh? It's knowing the backstory, knowing the context, knowing what's going on, right? Mr. X can say something that sounds totally bland to me, but if Mr. Y and Mr. Z know what's up, they might start laughing like crazy. The story can be everything. Our reading today is going to tell us what life is like if there's no story. Now, the writer of our lesson identifies himself only as the teacher. And Bible scholars are nearly positive that this is King Solomon. Who's Solomon? He was king from about 970 to 931 BC. And he was the golden age. Everybody always wanted to go back to the time of King Solomon. God had given him extraordinary wisdom. People would come from countries all around just to hear him talk. And then on top of that, God had given him extraordinary wealth. One chart that I saw estimated his wealth in today's dollars at $2.2 trillion was Solomon's net worth. That is crazy. But now Solomon is reaching the end of his life, and he writes the book of Ecclesiastes to reflect on some lessons learned, some lessons that he's learned the hard way. All his wealth did not give him meaning or satisfaction. So as I read our lesson now, listen for two things in here that everyone in here can relate to. We read from Ecclesiastes chapters 1 and 2, selected verses. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish? Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth, to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I told you to look for two things that everyone in here could relate to. Thing number one, you toil all the days of your life. I plugged in some numbers. If you work 40 hours a week, from the time you turn 18 to the recommended retirement age right now of 67, you will work 101,920 hours. That's a lot of hours. That doesn't count any overtime. That doesn't count all the work you do around your house. That doesn't count the 24/7 job of raising a family. What a heavy burden. All our days are grief and toil, Solomon said. Thing number two that you can relate to, everyone in here will die. You, your friends, your family, your coworkers. That is when our days of toil end, when we turn back to dust. Now, thing number two really renders thing number one pretty meaningless, doesn't it? Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. That Hebrew word that gets translated as meaningless, more literally, it's vapor. That's why I had the kids breathe like that before. It is nothing. Picture your breath on a cold day. You can see it for a second, and then it's gone. You try to grasp it, and there's nothing there. And that can kind of be a depressing thought, can't it? That all our toil and life is meaningless. And yet that is an accurate picture of life if there is no story, if there's no background story. But there is a story. God has made you part of his salvation story. Our lesson used the phrase under the sun. Let's call God's story over the sun. Because God saw the predicament that mankind was in. He didn't create us to labor meaninglessly all the days of our lives under the sun. He created us to enjoy all of his blessings and live with him forever. And then sin wrecked that. Sin corrupted the world so completely that hard labor and death came into the world. But God wanted to change that. So after thousands of years of anticipation, of setting the stage, that's what the whole Old Testament is. The climax of God's salvation story is when Jesus broke the power of sin on the cross. I said, will die. He even beat death when he rose from the grave. That is God's salvation story, and you are part of that story because God did that all for you. That means that your days on this earth are not fleeting and short because you're part of this over the sun eternal story. You have purpose and meaning and direction in life because you fit into a story. It's not like a joke with no context. You really do have meaning. Our lesson pointed especially to the meaninglessness of pursuing wealth in this world. Now, it would be very easy for me to stand up here and bash unbelievers for how much they pursue wealth, especially in America, right? Everybody wants to be richer and richer, the almighty dollar. Our lesson, though, it's not really written to unbelievers, nor is it written for people that don't have very much. It's really targeted towards people that have been tremendously blessed. And that means Christians, and that means you and me. Do I need to convince you that you are tremendously blessed? I'm going to do it anyway. I looked at some numbers online, compared a few sources to give you the best possible estimate. The poverty line in the United States right now for an individual is a little over $15,000 a year. If you are at the poverty line, you are still in the top 30% worldwide. Making over $15,000, you are better off than 7 out of 10 people across the world. That's a pretty big blessing. If you're a couple making combined $60,000 a year, you're in the top 15% of the world. And picture all the modern conveniences and amenities that we have, right? Indoor plumbing, microwaves, everything that uses a motor. Even Solomon, in all of his splendor, he would be jealous of the blessings that we get to enjoy. We are so blessed. And that is why we need Solomon's warning here too. Because we are susceptible to chasing after wealth, chasing after all the things that wealth can buy. I could bash unbelievers, but this is for us too, right? Maybe we acknowledge that wealth is vapor. We can sit here and nod and agree. But is that how we really live, day in and day out? If I asked you at any given point of the day, would you be focusing on long-term value or on short-term value? On heavenly treasures or on your salary? Would you be storing up for yourselves those things that Jesus talks about, or would you be storing up things in your wallet? Our gospel lesson said, the man was storing up grain, building new storehouses. Are we more concerned about storing up for retirement? Because that's really what it sounds like. About building the storehouse that is our wallet. And maybe the worst offense of that is that we chase after those things, wealth and its pleasures, all while we give lip service to our long-term value, our over-the-sun story. The famous Christian writer C.S. Lewis, he once said, "The man who has God and everything else has no more than he who has God only." With or without wealth, we have meaning in our life. With or without wealth, we are part of God's salvation story. With or without wealth, Jesus came and died for you to rescue you from the power of sin. Salvation has been won. Sin has been beaten. And that is something that money cannot buy. You have what wealth can't get you. What God has done for you, it is not a vain puff of breath. This is an eternal reward. And how freeing isn't that? That day in and day out, you have something that lasts forever. You don't have to run around searching for meaning in money or in every other little thing that the world likes to chase after. You have a purpose as part of God's story every day. And it's not just a story that you are part of. This is also a lens through which you view the world. You can see what really has value and what doesn't. Like those people running around and chasing after other things, you see that they're chasing short term. They are chasing life under the sun. They don't have any value over the sun. You can see how fruitless it is to store up for yourself all these things on earth. You can see the value of being generous, because it's not about how rich you are. It's about how rich God has been towards you and how you in turn can be rich towards others. You can see dollars not as status symbols, because they're not. You can see them as gifts from a gracious God who gives you all these good things. And I want to be clear, I'm not trying to say that it's bad to have wealth or to have good things. God gives you these good things. He grants them and you can enjoy them. That is a good thing. Solomon said in our lesson, "What better can you do than eat and drink and take satisfaction in your toil?" With God, you can do that. You can enjoy short-term things. And you can enjoy them with true contentment because you recognize that they're only short-term. You have long-term value. So even if you don't have those things, you still know where you stand. Just because you have long-term value, though, it doesn't mean that life never feels transitory, right? There are some days when work just feels like a slog. There are days when your pocketbook will fluctuate. There are days when you will see those around you turn back into dust. And life feels transitory in those moments. But when you're overwhelmed by the transitory nature of life under the sun, remember your over the sun story. Think about how great of a blessing that is. You know the cosmic story. So many people don't know that, and you do, and you know how that story ends. That is peace that you can have every day, your entire life through. That is meaning greater than any other meaning. That is something wealth cannot buy. What the Lord has done for you is not a vain puff of breath. He has given you His Son. He has given you a heavenly resolution to His story. That is forever. That is your life, and that is a life that is meaningful. Amen.